Hej allihopa. If you want to, I can speak English. Yes? Yeah. Yeah, the presentation is in English also. And I am like the key person in the network Traditionsbärarna. Instead of being a company with employees, we are a specialist network group where I have colleagues, craftsmen and architects and engineers all over the country that we collaborate together and doing restoration work. And we do small work and larger work. And when I do both investigations of buildings, making a damage survey or investigation of tool traces and values. It can be restoration work or reconstruction, as you can see on the reconstruction of Södra kyrka. It was burnt down by an arsonist 2001, and we have doing a scientific reconstruction project. Outside on the table here I have some books that I have been part of, so you can read more about Södra project in one of the books. Little about tool traces and historical values. Oh, it should be a movie here. No? Okay. What we are doing here is that we are cleaving planks into boards, and before the medieval sawmills were invented, all the planks and boards have to be produced by cleaving and cutting. So the Norwegians said that, we can only make 2 boards out of each log. But when we were studying tool traces, we saw that they have made 4 or even more planks out of each log, snapping the line, using a wooden club and the axe, and turn around and slowly open up you can actually cleave it into more planks. And for this project, we have been working outside in the forest in wintertime. And then we realized the value of all these handmade planks. So if you go into a medieval church and you see thousands of meters of these planks, and you realize that planks before the sawmills, they were very valuable and they were reusing them all the time. When I was visiting this place that you could see lots of preserved, cleaved and hewed planks in the bulbs. You can even see in the traces, the tool traces, you can see what type of axe and what type of method they have used to produce the boards. Just looking at with the racing light, you can see these details really good. This should be a movie, but it's obviously not a movie. We have restored one-bladed sawmill from 1760. And we have rebuilt the axle and the water wheel and the whole mechanism and started it up this summer. And it was really a game changer when you had this opportunity to use the water power. And parallel to this technique, when you have just a one-bladed sawmill, you can also be 2-person using the pit saw and do it manually. So you can say both the pit saw and the water has been used until 1850, when you have the steam power, making that you could locate a sawmill wherever you want, instead of locate them where the water power was. And now when we have this sawmill working again, we can now produce spare parts for all the buildings built between the medieval time and 1850, because all the planks and boards, they look like this. You can see this in the end, that you have the little splitted surface and you have the cut for the saw bench. And when you're sawing with a one-bladed sawmill, you have to put the log on the bench, sawing one time, take it back, move the log, saw next one, move the log, saw next one, and then in the end you split them away, and then you have these tool trays. So now we have the spare parts. And using modern planks is just as wrong as many other ways of working. And tool traces are very important to understand when you do the restoration. If you see, this is Gloucester Castle, and you can see that you have the marking with a red pen, and between the lines you have used the handsaw as deep as you could, and then cutting with the axe the rest. And you could see also the traces of how the tools really look, how is the edge of the axe and the chisels, to understand what tools have they used. So we can use the same tools to understand. If you can understand the tool traces, you can read what the building is telling you. Also, lots of parts that are reused. So our philosophy is really to include craft specialists in an early stage, and doing this together with the engineers and architects gives you a good understanding of the cause of the problem. I mean, if you have a damage, it's not always that this piece have reached the end of its life cycle. It might be in the beginning or in the middle of the life cycle, but the damage was caused by something else that destroyed it. So every restoration is really a well of knowledge. And if you're just open-minded, then you can read the tool traces, you can gain so much more from the restoration. I think that when we work with a building, we first want to make the investigation and looking at all this to finding the soul of the building, so you don't throw that in a container. And if you have to take away damaged parts, it's very important to document them and understanding them and communicate them with everyone in the project. So not only the craftsman, but also the architects and the owner of the building knows this. So I have some examples of when we're doing this work. A couple of years ago, they was calling us and said, we have a problem. They've made a large restoration of the church, and when they should change the copper plates on the top, they realized that it was just decomposed underneath. And I would say more than 90% was just decomposed of this very, very well-made shapes in wood, handmade for the copper plate. Very unnecessary because you can't see it, it's 60 meters up, but it was super quality from 1742. And so they called us and said, can you help us out? So we was going there, and we said that to understand what is the problem, we really need to make a 3D to see where is the damage and what's the problem. When I was going up on the scaffolding, I was leaning my hand against the whole tower, and it was doing like this, 15 ton. And the Swedish king lives down there. So you can see that these 8 legs going down one level further down. That was the only thing that was holding it. And it was standing about 3.5 meters, so it was very narrow. And all the red parts were totally gone. And the green part is restoration from 1924. And now we could communicate easier with these 3D pictures. We can get even the weight of all the parts. And as you could see it, when we vacuumed away all the rotten pieces, it was just empty. And there was no birch bark between the walls and the timber. And there was lots of trash and condensation, and there was no access to this. So nobody has ever been there since 1742. So it was like an archaeological excavation in this trash. Really interesting. So we had to lift it up very carefully, one corner at a time, and put in new timber and set it down and take the next corner. And making a documentation of all the parts that we were changing. And we could also see that you had a collapse in climate, and that was when it was very cold, so the ice was frozen between Denmark and Sweden, and that's when Sweden conquered Skåne. So you could see that in this log that you had this climate collapse there. Another project we have been working with this year is House of Sjö, one of the best preserved Baroque castles in Sweden, private owned. And one of the side buildings had been more or less just left there. And they wanted us to make a damage survey. They pretty much just closed the door and kind of crazy. But it's actually really interesting because we're gonna help them out with changing their outer roof and changing some of the beams here in the kitchen. But then actually leave this house as a scientific house, because you have the insight. When it starts to fall apart, you can see much easier how it's built up. So you can use it as a reference object for, like when Livadi had these courses in Louisari. So this is like a perfect object to study for restoration architects.
We'll come there.
Yeah. And I tried with my iPad with a LiDAR scanner to make a plan of the attic. And the attic is like, you have hundreds of old shoes. Crazy. It's shoes and trash and things everywhere. So it's like an archaeological site, really. That's why it looks so messy. And trying to figure out where do we have the damages. I also scanned inside the whole building, just with my iPad, making this, and so I can use it to communicate easier. Where are the problems and how is the house situated? And it was pretty much related to these dormers on the front side that have been leaking and causing these problems. Also, since 2018, when it was so dry and warm, the ground water level in the ground was lower, so it started to decompose the support for the house, and also big trees, and also a road very close to this house, and the new machines they are driving weight 10 tons or even more. So slowly this whole wall of the house is cracking. Big problem. So we just make a list of how to proceed with restoration, and there will be other companies doing the outer roof and the timber construction, and so I just helped out with sorting out what to do, because they were like starting in the wrong end with this project. So this is one of the ways that I am working. Another project I've been talking about before, about 9,000 hours of restoration of the roof construction between 8 years. We still have the towers left, but we will see when it will be done. And in the beginning, when the castle's roof were connected, they were not correctly connected because there were some parts missing that we know from documents that the building master was not present all the time. So there was like a built-in problem from day one. And it was slowly collapsing, and in 1960s they were like putting this rescue timber in there to save it. But it had been even worse, so now we had to do something. And we started to discuss this with the engineer and the owner. And in the library in Skokloster, you have this book, Architectura Civilis from 1649, one of 2 examples preserved in the world. And there we have the solution. So this is how it should be made. So we just, okay, this is probably the best way to do it. So we, together with Carl Thelin, the engineer, we added this missing part in the construction. And on these drawings, he didn't put any measures. So it's more or less just give it to us and fix it. Because everything is skewed and different dimensions, so it's pretty much was fix it, taking the measures on site. And all the timber that we was changing in the original construction, we were using, like going out to the forest with an axe and come back with the parts for the castle. And the parts that we were adding that was missing, we had the same technique and joinery, but we used sawn timber from a modern sawmill, so you can see the difference if you're looking closely on the tool traces. Tjoff, throwing in the new timber, and it was kind of complicated because we had to push the roof out to fix this. And the whole construction is made so you have this inner frame that is very strong and stiff, and outside you have the roof truss, and it's originally not in contact, so it's about 1 inch gap. So when you have it's flexible like a tree, where you have it's strong in the middle, and then further out it gets more soft. So the whole construction is like a suspension construction. So when you have a storm, the roof can move, and if it moves very much, it takes support from the inner construction. This is a little bit old-fashioned way of building. It was very interesting work. Another project this year, Linköping Kommun owns this house, and it's pretty much like a museum, but they want to rent it out. So the restoration architect said like, oh, hello, now we have to do some looking at the details and see what values do we have to take care of before we fill up the attic with ventilation and all kinds of stuff. So we really need to see what values do we have. So we were going around, and I was in the report using the existing plan and then just adding details of matter into this, so it would be easy to communicate for where do we have traces from older parts, dormers, and where do we have interesting tool traces, and so. And the outer barn, when we looked at it closely, we could see that it was showing up on the maps in 1770, but the lower part is probably 1600 something, because the lower part is moved. You have the marking system, and you can see on the color of the patina that it's different. So they just added 2 more levels on this building. And it's lots of graffiti and interesting details if you're looking closely. And we even found a dating written with a red pen, 1772. And this building is also 1770, but it was having a facelift in 1910, and then the roof started to collapse after that. So they will probably need some kind of reinforcement in a good style. And there has originally been tiles with a mortar from the inside. We found small pieces with a hair from cows to support the mortar. A church attic that we were examining in one of the investigation projects, and we realized that it's a flat roof inside, and all the tie beams were buried in this mineral insulation. And when we were digging in that, we realized that there was lots of old damages that they just covered up in the insulation. Oh, problem gone. So we got the church to vacuum out all this old insulation. It was really bad environment for breathing. And they only using this church now and then. So they said, we don't need insulation. We just heat it a few hours when we use it, and then it's cold. It's from 1250 approximately, and it survived cold. So that's probably the best. And you can see it was really bad shape. Everything is built in oak, and it's very unique construction. And it was all lots of rot, but also lots of insects. So you really don't know how strong are these tie beams in the bottom. And we saw some of older restoration in one part from 1750, and they used these iron clamps. So we thought, that looks good. So now we have added round spruce, really strong, long beams over the whole floor, the green ones, and then we attach them to each tie beam with this. So it helps out building like a big supporting surface. And we also had to change some parts for the missing struts inside. And we made this into like a happening with the local. I went there and had the presentation about all the details. My colleagues were standing outside hewing the oak that was delivered by a local farmer. So we took large engagement with everyone living around the church, they were very proud about this project. So it was very good public education about the church building and the history around it. And getting material for restoration can be tricky. And next year we will do a restoration of this medieval bell tower in Sweden, the oldest one from 1260 that we have. I think it's one of 5 oldest in Europe. And everybody thought it was 1750 because it said that in the museum document. But we went there and looked at the tool traces and saw, no way, this must be medieval, before the Black Death in 1350. So we have made lots of investigations and dendrodating and archaeological excavation in the bottom. And so we will make a restoration project, but also a scientific restoration where we trying to gain as much possible information. We will take off the whole roof and the panel, because originally it's panel on this, lying like a cladded. So we will scanning the whole construction also. This is also a film, but now the tree is still standing. So we went out to the forest to find a few old large pine trees for 8-meter longs, 16 by 16 inch. And that is like 40 by 40 centimeters, square edges, even in the top. So you'll need pines about this big. There are not so many of them left, because we have already taken them down for other bell towers. So the resources are not so many anymore. And taking down the tree, and it is so heavy, so instead of taking machines and take it out of the forest, it's cheaper and easier just to hew it to the dimension and leave it in the forest for 2 years to dry under weather cover. So it's just lying there now waiting for being put up in the bell tower. So we were standing here last winter working in moonlight. It was really nice with a little fire to cook the food. And engaging, and then we went to another forest very close to the church, and all of a sudden there were like people from the village and the parish helping out and coming there and cooking food for us. There were lots of engagement, and we had a presentation in the church, and we were filling the church to the last seat. They hadn't experienced that for many, many years. So it gives so much more back to the restoration and for further generations, that this building will survive better when you have the pride from the people living next to it. And for us doing the craft, if we never work with traditional tools, we are not able to read the tool traces. So every restoration we do, we say that we at least 50% of the work we will do traditionally with the same technique and the same tools. Otherwise, we can't read the tool traces and gaining the value. So yeah, that was a little bit of inspiration for this day.